This video tutorial is compatible with Photoshop CC and Photoshop CS6. We'll start this composite project with this image captured in the desert. I'm going to fit in view by doing Command 0 or Control 0 on a PC just to make sure we can see all of the image before I drag the image of Emma from Mini Bridge onto the host image, and I'll just hold down the Shift key to center that. Okay, now if we've got perfect alignment into the corners, I'll just hit that commit transform icon in the options bar. It is important that we do have alignment here. I'll just select the move tool. We do need to make sure that this is in perfect alignment with the background image. Okay, and the reason for that is I've actually embedded a path to fast track this project so we can create a quick and easy selection. Okay, I'm just going to double click on Mini Bridge just to collapse that, and again fit in view Command 0 or Control 0 on a PC, and I'll open the layers panel here. Now this is a smart object. I'm not intending to scale this again, so I can right click on this layer and choose rasterize layer. Okay, now the path that we're going to use for the selection we can find in the paths panel, and if I right click on this path I can choose the make selection option here. Okay, now a feather radius of 1 pixel is appropriate for this project, so we're going to select OK. Okay, now the path is only going around the harder edges of the subject, so we just need to complete this selection by using the quick selection tool. I'll also click on the layers panel just to return. Okay, so with the quick selection tool, okay, I can increase the size of that quick selection tool using the square bracket keys. Here I'm using the close square bracket key just to enlarge that brush slightly, and then I'm going to click and drag to add the head and the hair to this selection. Okay, now we've got a few pockets of hair that is selected where we can see the background showing through, so I actually want to subtract these from the selection that I have active at the moment. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, Command spacebar on a Mac or Control spacebar on a PC just to zoom in slightly. Okay, I'm going to reduce the size of the quick selection brush just by using the open square bracket key. Okay, and holding down the option key I can subtract this area from the selection, just anywhere where we can see hair showing through. Okay, and again holding down the space bar I can move around the image and subtract other areas where I can see islands or pockets of background showing through the hair. So I'll just reduce the size of the brush even more, holding down the Alt option key, and just click to remove that section from the selection. Okay, and there's some areas here where I can also see background, so again holding down the option key and click and to select and remove those areas. And just down here at the base of the hair, again holding down the option key, click and drag to remove that. I'll just add a little bit, we've got a little bit of the jewelry that should be in there, so I'm just adding that back into the selection. Okay, Command or Control 0 to fit in view, and now we're ready to go into the refine edge to refine the edge of this selection because we're about to create a mask. From the view menu you want to choose on layers. Okay, and we're going to select the refine edge or refine radius tool here in the refine edge dialog, and then I can increase the size of this by just clicking and dragging in the options bar here using that scrubby slider to increase the size, and I'll probably choose around about 100 pixels or so. Okay, and what we're going to do now is wipe around to add any hair that I don't actually have in this selection. Okay, so just adding this. Now it's very important as we come down the area here, we don't move into the solid area of subject, especially important when we get down to the arm here. If you're having trouble seeing where the actual hair ends, then we can zoom in to this area, again using that Command spacebar to zoom in, and again reducing the size of that brush there. I'm just going to come over the top of the hand, and again making sure that this brush cursor doesn't extend into the actual hand itself, so being very careful to move along that edge. Okay, we'll also need the same amount of care when we work inside this arm here, that we don't extend the brush into any areas which is 100% opaque. So again, a fairly small brush and carefully drawing along the edge there. Okay, I'll just add all of this hair to the mask. Okay, and again, spacebar, drag, and this is the final section of the hair that we need to add. Again, just coming down, selecting any areas where there should be hair, and just extending down, again being very careful as we approach the leg not to extend the brush into that leg. Okay, and just coming down, brushing down, and again being careful not to extend the brush into the solid area of subject near the jewelry there. Just carefully working that area until the last of the hair is selected. Okay, and that is now all selected into that mask. Okay, so again I can Command 0 to zoom out, or Control 0 on a PC. Now we're losing a little bit of the hair, and we can actually add that back in by using the Shift Edge slider. Let's just zoom in and take a look as we move that Shift Edge slider, the impact of actually adding this. Okay, now if I drag this to the right, we're going to get more detail. We've got a little bit of the old background showing through, so there's a little bit of grey appearing around those hair, and we can actually remove that using the Decontaminate Colors option here. And if we click and then drag the amount slide up to around about plus 80% or so, we can see we can remove all of the old grey background around those strands of hair. Okay, now we do have to be a little bit careful with that Shift Edge. The Shift Edge is actually helping to add more detail in the hair. Let's just drag that back to 0 there, so you can see that. We're actually losing some of the hair with a low Shift Edge value, and we actually get a better improvement in the hair quality by dragging that higher to the right. This plus value in the Shift Edge slider though is working in the opposite direction to the ideal value for the harder edges of the subject, and if it wasn't for this Decontaminate Colors option, we would actually have a dark line starting to appear as we drag that over to the right. So it's a little bit of a balance between the harder edges and the maximum detail in the hair here, but these two values, plus 20 and plus 80% on the Decontaminate, it gives us a nice balance between the softer edges of the hair and the harder edges of the subject. Okay, we're going out to a new layer with Layer Mask, and so we'll select OK. Okay, now we can actually improve some edge quality in some areas. We've got a little bit of a decontamination error here. Some of the skin colors from the hand is actually moving into that area of hair around here, so that can actually be fixed by switching on the visibility of the original layer and turning the blend mode to multiply, and also copying the layer mask. Okay, holding down the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC, just click and drag to add that to the original layer. Now if we return to the mask on the top layer, click to select it, okay, and we select the brush tool, press the B key in order to select the brush tool, and we set the opacity at 50%. I've just pressed the 5 key on the keyboard, select 50%, and again we're using a fairly small brush. I can come in and paint into that mask just to restore some of those areas. I just need to switch the foreground color here to black, okay, before I paint in, and this will just restore some of the original hue values to that area of the hair there. You might find that in other areas we can actually get slightly better detail or color detail in that hair area by also painting out in those areas. Okay, I think there's one other decontamination error in this file, just coming down at the base here, and again just a 50% brush, just brush that to restore some of the color there. Okay, now one of the problems with switching this layer back on is that we don't have the decontaminate feature being applied to this second layer, so we might find some of the harder edges are not as good now, and that is because of that plus 20 value we applied in the Refine Edge dialog. One of the areas that I can actually see a bit of a dark line coming off now is perhaps from the hand down to the elbow. The rest of the edges are looking pretty okay, so I'm just going to do a localized adjustment to this edge. Now the problem edge is sitting on the original Emma layer, not the copy, because this is the one that's had the decontamination error removed. Okay, so we're going to work with the original Emma layer on the mask there, so that's now selected. We're going to select the lasso tool, and we're going to enter in a feather radius of 5 pixels. This is important when we actually cross the edge with a selection, that we don't create a step when we move the image, the edge. Okay, so I'm just going to select the hand there and come down and come all the way down to the elbow, which is where that dark line sort of ends there, and lasso back up to the starting position to complete that selection. We're now going to come in with the levels adjustment in order to shift that edge. On a Macintosh, that's Command L, on a PC Control L to bring in the levels adjustment. Okay, this histogram represents just the transition at the edge, so we don't have any values in the middle, just at the extreme edges, which represents the edge transition. Okay, if I move the gamma slider and I push it over to the right, you can see that we actually start pushing the edge of the mask. Let's just zoom in so you can see that again. I'll just move it back to its default value and then move it to the right. Okay, is going to hide that darker edge there. We can also increase the contrast of that edge just by raising this black input slider as well. I'm going to raise this one to around about 80, just back that gamma slider off, okay, slightly. Okay, now that I've got that edge refined in a localized area of the mask, I'll just select OK. And now I'll choose Command D or Control D on a PC just to deselect that selection, and I'll zoom back out. Now you can move around other areas looking for any dark edges that need further refinement. There is an additional one that I know occurs in this particular file, and this is just down here. It's not as severe as the previous one, but we can now just lasso that, okay, coming down just to that edge of that cuff of the garment there, and coming back into this edge. Now if you want to apply the levels adjustment with the previous setting, all you need to do is when you use the keyboard shortcut for the levels adjustment, Command L or Control L, just throw in the Alt key on a PC or the Option key on a Mac as well. So that's Command Option L or Control Alt L, and that brings in the levels adjustment with the previous setting used, so you don't have to keep on adjusting these sliders. That makes it a fairly quick operation to scoot around the edge, just applying the previous levels adjustment in order to refine the entire edge of this image. Okay, so let's zoom back out, Command 0, Control 0 to fit on screen. Now we've got a reasonably good Emma sitting or floating above the desert sand here, so she really needs to be reconnected with her shadow to give her placement in this new location. So I'm going to do that by making sure I've still got the original layer mask selected on this original Emma layer. And we're going to move over to the gradient tool, press G on the keyboard. I'm going to select white as the foreground color, so you could press X on the keyboard just to switch those default colors over. I'm using the foreground to transparent option, which is the second one in, and I'm also using the reflected gradient option rather than the linear for this particular problem solving technique. Okay, and we're working at 100% opacity. I'll just click in the options bar to cancel that presets, and I'm going to click just where Emma touches or should be touching the sand here. Just click, and then holding down the shift key, just drag a very short gradient up, and obviously being a reflected option, it goes both up and down at the same time, and this reunites that shadow courtesy of the multiply blend mode on this particular layer. Okay, so now that Emma has been reconnected with her shadow, she actually looks like she's actually sitting on this new surface. Okay, all we're going to do now is just do a final few adjustments just to correct the color balance between the two files. Okay, I'm just going to select the background layer, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key on a PC or the Option key on a Mac as I select the solid color adjustment layer. Okay, now holding down the Alt or Option key opens up the new layer dialog, and we do have the option now of setting this adjustment layer into the color blend mode, which is very important for this particular technique I'm showing you, which is to try and match the color of the sand to the garment that the girl is wearing, just so we can reduce the clash between the two colors here. And I'll select OK. Now the color picker will open, and one of the default values might be a neutral color, which is why the sand has had its color drained from it. But we're going to come into the image preview here so we can see the eyedropper, and we're just going to click on the garment, and this automatically syncs the color values of the sand to the garment, and I'll select OK. Now if we do want to restore some of the original color or color values, we can just do that by lowering the opacity of this color fill layer. If I was to lower this opacity down to perhaps 85% or so, you can see we're striking up a little bit of balance between the flesh tones, or the old yellow tones of the sand, and actually the colors in the garment, and that gives me a sort of more pleasing effect for this composite image. I'm now just going to do a minor retouch. I've just noticed that there's a slightly awkward shadow just on the left side of the model's face here, which I can fix up really quite quickly. I'll just select the top layer and then click on the Create New Layer icon to add an empty new layer, and we're going to set the blend mode of this new layer to lighten. So we can lighten the shadows on the side of the face here. I'm just going to zoom in so we can see what we're doing. Command spacebar and drag the zoom tool there over the area that I want to work on. And we're going to select the brush tool. And instead of working with quite this high value of 50%, I'm just going to quickly type in 15 to adjust that to 15%. Okay, now I'm going to sample some of the lighter colors of the skin by holding down the Alt key on a PC or the Option key on a Mac. I should open up with the Eyedropper tool now so that I can sample. If you can't sample the skin color that I'm doing here, then just make sure you've got the Eyedropper options set to all layers in the options bar here. Okay, that does allow you to sample what you can see, what is on the layer. Okay, and there is actually nothing on this layer, so we do need that sample all layers option selected. I'll return to the brush tool. Okay, now I've sampled that lighter skin color at 15%. I can just, with a soft edge brush, let's just make sure that hardness is set to 0. Okay, and now I can just brush down on that shadow, and especially just underneath the lips there, just to reduce the impact of that shadow, which just gives a slightly unpleasant shape to the face here. And just a couple more passes just on that side of the face should help just create a much smoother contour there. I'll just reduce the size of the brush as I move underneath the lips there. Now if I click on and off the visibility of this layer, we'll see that we've actually created a much pleasanter shape to this side of the face, which we could have done in the studio with the lighting, but we can also do in post-production. Okay, and I'll just zoom out, and that completes this quite sophisticated montage where we've got shadows, sharp edges, and also the softer edges, and doing a little bit of color matching there.